From the Retool Studio and Athlete Lounge in Boulder, Colorado, we're live with Retool TV with George Thomas. I want to thank our supporters. We've got Zeal Optics to thank very much for this show taking place. Retool, of course, Core Power, Scratch Labs, and just want to thank everyone for tuning in to our new show, which is going to become a regular here on the internet. And I want to welcome our guests tonight. We've got John Tarkington from Fast Cat Coaching, Timmy Duggan, and Dr. Stephen Mellis. Ann Tromley is a little hard to see. She's here in the iPhone calling us from California this evening. I was thinking about as we put this show together that comeback stories are almost becoming kind of a dime a dozen. They're almost losing their impact. You hear so many of them, but then you get to live one. Timmy Duggan wins the U.S. Pro Road Championships last year. He's on the U.S. Olympic team, competes at the World Road Championships, named a Saxo Tinkoff. You've got kind of your dream season, and all of a sudden you're at the Tour Down Under and have a severe crash, and your season is not what you planned. What I'd like, Timmy, is if you'd kind of go through exactly what happened. We've talked about that a lot. People have read about it, but just kind of to get everybody up to speed, what exactly happened to you? What injuries did you sustain down when you were racing in Australia?
Yeah, down at the Tour Down Under, which was my first race of the season. I was going pretty well. I'm looking forward to having some good rides there. One of the stages in the middle of the race, we were going through a roundabout at almost 50 miles an hour. And I slid out in the middle of the roundabout, clipped the pedal or something. I'm not really sure what happened. Sometimes it just happens on a slippery road or gravel or whatever. All I know is I was sliding into the curb at 50 miles an hour and took a pretty good beating. And that resulted in a broken clavicle and a broken tibia plateau. So the very next day I was well taken care of down there in Australia and had surgery to repair both of those fractures. And a few days later I was back on the plane back to the States to assemble my recovery team and get started on the long, slow process of getting back to it.
And how did you assemble that team? Are these all people that you knew, you'd worked with in the past? Were they people that came recommended to you?
Yeah.
And let's not forget Ann, who is right over there.
We need to put her up a little high. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm no stranger to injuries, big and small, like most athletes. And a lot of the guys that I work with, in my kind of rehab team, Steve, an acupuncturist, or Andy Pruitt at Boulder Center for Sports Medicine for bike fitting stuff. These guys we use even when we're not injured, just for kind of regular maintenance kind of stuff. And then when I do get injured, I get the pleasure of hanging out with Ann Tromley, doing physical therapy, and my orthopedic doctor that I've worked with, Dr. James Reed. But yeah, so everybody I've been working with on this round, on this injury, I have experience with in the past, and so yeah, I know them, and I know that they're the best, and I know I'm 100% well taken care of.
Dr. Mellis, you're with Proactive Chiropractic in Gunboro, Colorado.
Yes, sir.
You are an incredible torture master, but you're also known as having the magic hands. Therapist for the 2012 U.S. Olympic team. What were you looking at when Timmy came in to see you the first time?
Well, you never know with these traumatic injuries. Each one, of course, is individual. For example, with Tim, he's got the same fracture that Lindsey Vonn had, but much different. She fractured her tibial plateau in her well-publicized crash recently, but she also had all kinds of soft tissue trauma as well. And one of the great things about Tim's injury is that he experienced very little of the soft tissue trauma, and that it was very much a clean break at the tibial plateau. There are times when you can distort ligamentous structure, which is one of the problems that Ms. Vaughn had there with needing to have her whole knee rebuilt there. Tim, not at all. It seems like they put a couple screws in and we're back in business with very little in terms of collateral damage. So you never know what you're going to find with these, but once they come in and you get a sense of it, that kind of gets you started. Whatever's left is what you have to work with. And with Tim, it was inflammation and some range of motion. Also, we had a little bit of scarring in there after these procedures. There's always some soft tissue scarring, so we set about working on that, and are still, although we'll be kissing them goodbye pretty soon here, I hope.
That's one thing I've really noticed with the treatment team is that, you know, unlike, not to make fun of clinical psychiatrists, but you guys are there to get Timmy out of your office and back on the road, not keep him in therapy. And did you ever feel like your treatment and, say, Dr. Mellis were at odds with each other? Because Dr. Steve's there really reaming on Timmy's legs, and we're talking about inflammation, and you're trying not to make Timmy cry, and Dr. Steve's doing everything he can to get the screams coming.
Yeah, no, I was never really concerned about it. I think the communication, even though I didn't get to talk to the doctor, we really communicated with Timmy and able to communicate with his coach, John, and we kept, and via emails, I think the doctor and everybody had great communication, and that's what's key to make sure that someone's not doing something that's, inhibiting what the other person is doing or causing something that more inflammation or things that you don't want. So I think really that's what was key for Timmy's treatment, is making sure that we're all on the same page. And I think it went really well. And also because Timmy does communicate very well with everybody also.
I would agree. Yeah, Tim is able to tell me exactly what the doctor tells him that day, so that if though I'm not directly speaking to him, Tim's a reliable recorder and messenger there, and he's been through this, and he knows the anatomical terms and the medical terms, and he pays attention to what's going on. So he makes it quite easy on the rest of us to do our job, even if we're compartmentalized to some extent.
Which I mean, that's why I wanted as many of you here as you could, because, there are 5 people on your recovery team that all really had to work together to get you back. And
Yeah,
they've done a pretty phenomenal job.
Definitely, everybody is certainly a critical piece of the pie, and maintaining that line of communication between everybody was really important. Working with Anne in physical therapy, what she has to say about what I'm doing in physical therapy has a direct translation to my training plan that John is designing, or what Steve says doing the muscle therapy and the chiropractic, that has a direct translation to what Anne's doing on me. So yeah, everything's just really interconnected. Absolutely.
And John, I mean, you've been working with Timmy. You put his plan together in January, and all of a sudden you're dealt this hand, and it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? What were you thinking about as far as Timmy's recovery and his workout plan?
It's actually kind of odd. With guys at this level, it's actually fairly common to get some sort of sidetrack and or speed bump with what you lay out as the ideal racing plan for the year, because frequently it's either a minor crash or the team has a schedule change, and it can be a drastic schedule change. You hear stories all the time about guys that are getting ready to take a nice little break in July, and all of a sudden somebody crashes, and all of a sudden they're doing the Tour de France. And they get 2 or 3 days notice. So those types of things happen, so it's kind of easy to be prepared for those, but one where it's this significant, that's a little more, it's a little more difficult to deal with initially, but once you get rolling, normally when you have these types of recovery teams, there's one kind of kingpin individual outside of the athlete who's kind of tying it all together, and that's what was kind of wild about this one. Was, like everybody's been saying, Timmy actually tied a huge chunk of this together. Like when we would sit down to talk about training, he would say what's going on with Dr. Mellis, and then I was able to communicate with Anne because we share office space, and it was really easy to get information through Timmy from Andy Pruitt and from Dr. Reed, and it was very, very smooth. And I think it went from, at one point when he was still in the hospital in Australia, claiming that we were going to have long conversations, and this was probably 5-6 days later, okay, we were starting to look at what is going to be the first race back. So, and it was that
when it's 6 days of the crash.
And as soon as you have that on the horizon, you're good to go. They've got their mind on it. The whole team kind of sets their mind on it, and yeah, once you have everybody's got the same goal, it's pretty. When you've got somebody tying it together, and in this case it was Timmy, it's pretty easy to achieve it.
The nice thing in this case was, you know, the injuries were, well, they sucked. They were pretty simple. I mean, bones heal in 10 weeks, and that's just kind of how it is. So you can pretty easily plan, you know, your comeback and your training, and you know, your next goals around that. You know, whereas with a bunch of soft tissue damage, or for example a head injury like I had a few years ago, there's just so many unknown factors, and you can't say, you know, right after the injury, okay, you know, in all likelihood in 12 weeks you're going to be fine. With a head injury or soft tissue damage or something more complicated, or an illness, those are way harder to predict and to to deal with the kind of comeback and scheduling that effectively.
This is a question for all of you, and so please, everybody please chime in, but I think Adrian Peterson last year, the running back who almost took the NFL rushing record after just destroying his knee, and I've been reading some articles that now players that have had the same injury, this new bar has been set for recovery that's almost unrealistic, well, is unrealistic. And one thing that really stood out to me about Timmy as the athlete, and Dr. Mellis and everyone on the team, has been, no, Timmy's not going to rush this. He's going to come back when he's ready, when he's recovered. Was there ever any feeling that, gosh, we got to speed this up?
For me, no. I mean, with where my goals are in the season, and just the fact that in professional road bike racing, I don't think there's any other sport in the world that has a season as long as we do. So you miss out 3 months like I am, I've still got 6 more months of racing. Whereas you have this injury in another sport where maybe the season is only 4 months long, you're a baseball player or something, I mean, you're effectively out for the season. By the time you get back into it, there's 3 weeks left. So that's, you know, for me, and in this sport, in the time that I did this, it certainly, you know, wasn't a tremendously devastating blow. You know, there's still a lot of time, a lot of races to be done.
Ann?
Yeah, and I mean, you can hear Timmy's attitude, and I think that is, again, what helped a lot for myself, to just know that he didn't feel like I got to get on the bike tomorrow or yesterday. And I mean, I think being a professional athlete, I know that, yeah, we do want to get him out there as soon as possible, but then the PT side is, if we get him out there sooner than he's ready for, he's just gonna go backwards. So it's not worth doing that. So I think, again, just Timmy's awesome attitude and being able to hold back, because I do know some athletes that have gone out there too soon, and they're screwing something else up. So it's just really not worth it. So just taking a step back and going, hey, let's really take this at the rate that he's healing and work that out. But yeah, again, Timmy's got a great attitude, so it helps that he's not chomping at the bit too much, even though he was a little bit. But yeah, he did great.
Yeah, again, for me, unfortunately, I've done this before, been through it before, and I've done it where, you know, you break your collarbone or something. And I remember I broke my collarbone at the Amstel Gold Race in 2010. And it wasn't a very bad break, like it wasn't displaced, and I actually had pretty good motion, but it was a broken collarbone all the same. The very next day I was on the trainer, you know, thinking like, you know, I gotta stay fit, I gotta do what do the most that I can do on any given day. And now, you know, I just have a different perspective on it. You know, it's like when you're broken, just chill out, sit down, and heal. When you're ready, then you can train, but you can't train when you're broken. It's just not in the cards, you know. So in the last few years with, you know, various orthopedic injuries I've had, I think I've just kind of changed my perspective. And yeah, I mean, you put the energy into, you know, the times and the ways that it's most effective. And, you know, putting your energy into training when you're still very, very broken is just, it's not very effective. You need to put your energy into healing at that point.
Dr. Steve, you work on a lot of world-class athletes. Is that a unique view, or one that
Well, typically with the athletes, one of the things that is often required is that you can get them back as soon as you can. So there is often pressure to achieve results as fast as you can. And that will often involve pushing timetables and testing limits maybe before you would with someone who had a day job down the street. So you can it can be tight at times where you with some athletes and some sports where you need to bring them back as soon as you can and maybe before you're really comfortable, but that's the nature of their sport and what's required of them. But as Timmy said, with the long cycling season and the spread out calendar, that gives a little breathing room there. And as an athlete, you need to take charge of that, because Timmy sure could push this the other way and say, no, I'm going back even earlier, and I want to. He rode 6 hours today. He could have said, oh, I want to ride 8 or 9, or so he can control that too. And that's the sign, I think, of a mature athlete, or one of them, is that they realize where they value things in a more appropriate manner. And I think the higher value is on healing correctly, as Timmy indicates, rather than getting back to racing quickly and not being ready. So, but you can find yourself, in that gray area where with other athletes, and at certain times, if his big race was a couple weeks away, we might be doing things a little differently.
Yeah, I think a big part of it just lies in the timing of an injury. Like in my case, it was the first race of the season. I come back and I still have 6 months of racing. But if this happened, 3 months before a major goal, the Olympics or the Vuelta or something, then maybe I would push it, or I can tell you, I would push it harder, and I would take the risk of, okay, I'm like not really 100% focusing on healing, but I'm like trying to train through this injury, and then at the end of the day, it's either going to work out and you're going to be fit in a really short time, or it won't, and you'll have tendonitis or something else will be messed up, or you delay the healing. But as certain times for certain goals, you have to take that risk, and that's okay. But for me, the timing of this at the beginning of the season, there was no reason whatsoever to push it to get back 2 or 3 weeks sooner. Whether I'm 90% or 100% at the Tour of California. I'd like to be 100%, but I'm not going to take all these risks to be 100%, because there's still so much more racing. If I just let it happen organically, I'll reach 100% at some point.
John, Timmy and I talked about this a little bit last week, but I was stunned when he hadn't been out on the bike and all of a sudden it was like, yeah, I'm doing 4-hour rides.
Yeah, I mean, so originally
and he was doing them comfortably.
And this is, it's a little. This is why this situation was a little unique to me, was that originally I laid out a very, very conservative path to get to the Tour of California, and even that was going to be an iffy component. The big part was having him ready to defend his national title, and I kind of had that as the priority. And then as time went on, we realized, okay, things were healing a little faster. He was able to do more than I really expected earlier on. But really, he really did do a good job of taking the time to heal, and frequently you just don't see that. My job a lot of the time with almost the majority of the people I work with is holding their leash. They all have the drive. Everybody's got that. But a lot of them don't know how to restrain as soon as they start to feel good, it's all or nothing. They go all in. And he showed a great deal of restraint along the way. And so we did end up doing a lot of stuff indoors, which is not his favorite thing in the world. So once he was really cleared to go outdoors, it was pretty much game on. And the one thing I've learned from working with him over the years is he has a pretty tremendous training capacity. And as a result, yes, as soon as he goes outside, he can do a bigger ride, take a day or two of lighter work, and be recovered and ready to go again.
Is it at all intimidating to work with someone? You've got the U.S. Pro Road Champ that you're coaching, to say, no, you got to back off, or...
Oh no, it's actually surprisingly easy, because we quantify everything, and as a result, usually I'll know that yes, we need to hold back before they feel they need to hold back. And if they decide, all right, we'll push the limits, frequently I'll give them a little bit of leash just because I know that that next day it probably won't go well. And usually 99% of the time it doesn't go well, and I get to say I told you so. And I get to do that quite a bit. So and that we haven't had to do that much on this recovery path so far. So and then we are getting to the point where it's definitely his days are getting robust, and he's got a pretty substantial training load going, and we're going to try and roll that into his first race.
Was there a real specific timeline, again, a question for each of you, of goals that you wanted to see Timmy hit at a certain time? And if there were there any obstacles out there or speed bumps along the way where, uh-oh, Timmy's having some problems? Or was it a pretty good progression throughout? Steve?
You know, I think it's been quite smooth. In fact, the milestones that we might look for were all getting achieved before we might typically look for them, and so and that really again speaks to the how lucky Tim was in some sense that the fracture was very simple and uncomplex. And so that means that there's less to do, and gosh, if you just break a bone and that's all there is, well, that's a pretty simple deal. Those heal up pretty good, and there wasn't lots more. So there wasn't really a concern at any point because we were already kind of exceeding expectations. And I think with some of these athletes, that comes because they're in such great shape, and they heal better than average people because they're in better shape, and their system, their physiology is more honed, and they're doing more with nutrition, and their immune systems are really pumped from being so conditioned. So I think we see a little bit of that where Tim might be a fast healer, but yeah, no, it's been very smooth from our end.
Ann?
Yeah, I didn't have any specific. I mean, it's 6 to 8 weeks for bones to heal, so you know, he had a timeline where he could not bear weight, so that was really the only timeline that I was looking at was after 4 weeks, is he ready to put weight on his leg, and what's going to happen after he puts weight on his leg? Is he going to have to show increased swelling, or is he going to be okay with that? So for me, it was almost more of a day-to-day, like, you know, how much are we pushing him? Is he tolerating that? Is he getting more swelling? Is the swelling going down? And that's the key for the first few weeks, is really to get that swelling down. So if it's not coming down, and he had some swelling for a while, and I was really monitoring that, and it was hanging in there, so we, you know, then we back off a little bit and go, okay, it's down again, let's pump you up a little bit more. So it was more on a day-to-day or a week-to-week basis with him. It wasn't really looking at the typical timelines. It was, well, how does he look this week? Okay, let's push him. Okay, it's a little bit swollen, let's back him up. So, and he, like Dr. Mellis is saying, I mean, Timmy really healed well, and I agree. I think it's because his body is so fine-tuned to healing and muscle strength and getting the swelling out there and the nutrition. So it was pretty fun to watch the fact that he was healing faster than your average person that you would work with.
John, what were you looking at? I know Timmy was concerned about, you know, staying below a certain wattage or watching Time in the Hills, which is kind of hard to do when you live in Nederland.
Well, actually, really, it's kind of odd that he was cleared by Dr. Reed to actually start pedaling a bike pretty early on because Dr. Reed had experience with him before, and that was one of the first things he said to all of us was that Timmy's a fast healer. He knows he's a fast healer, that's how it works, and sure enough, that's how it was playing out. So he was cleared to at least start riding almost no resistance inside relatively early, and that actually helped facilitate healing. And so, you know, he was able to start turning circles really early, and that kind of helped some. And then what really was the driving force, just like Ann said, was the weight-bearing aspect. And as he could put more and more weight onto his leg, he could actually pedal at a higher and higher wattage. So we just gradually increased things there were times we would usually push the wattage a little bit before he pushed any weight. And really the deciding factor more than anything, besides weight bearing, was could he actually clip out of his pedal? Because that was a pretty major issue, because you're locked in your pedals, and the type of fracture he had, while it was relatively stable with the screws when it was exposed to lateral loads, any sort of twisting motion, and he was guarding a lot. And that's kind of a sign that you want to avoid doing that. So that's really what kept us inside, I think, until later on, which worked out really well, because that was about the point where he really could start doing a whole lot more. And it also happened to coincide when he was really ready to be done riding the trainer.
Working with John, he did a really good job. I'm a really goal-oriented person, whether it's big long-term goals or really small, what's my goal today? And here I am, I can hardly pedal a bike. Like, I don't even know what my goal is. Like, I can barely pedal a bike easily. So what am I after? And John did a really good job of saying, okay, this is we're doing 2 times 20 minutes, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, of no resistance. Just super basic, elementary bicycle riding. And then it was just a really graduated process, but just on such a micro level. It's like a microcosm of elite level training, but it's just on such a small and basic scale. So I actually kind of learned a lot, I think, about myself and just how training and the concepts that are at work in a bigger picture in my fitness on the higher end. It's the same kind of stuff, even if you're working with the absolute basics of pedaling motions, just a load and a progression, and getting a little bit better each time.
Yeah, I really want to thank everybody for letting me walk around and shove the camera lens in your personal moments and everything, because something John said just really triggered this in me, but Timmy could not get unclipped from a pedal. And I think with cycling, especially in America, where last year you saw Timmy at Tour of California pulling the pack a lot, really working his rear off, and you don't see him again until Tour of California again, and it's like, oh, Timmy got hurt. Wow, well, he looks great. And I'm so glad we're going to be able to show people the footage of you not being able to, you were hurt bad. And I think it's important that people realize what a spectacular comeback you're making.
Oh, thank you.
So, no, that's not the end of the show, though. You hear a lot about come back stronger, and you posted, Timmy, something about that on Facebook, that you think, hey, I'm going to be coming back stronger. How so?
Yeah, sometimes I don't think you necessarily come back stronger in general all around, but you come back different, and you might come back stronger in different areas. We're working with Dr. Pruitt there at Boulder Center for Sports Medicine. We've and also with Steve here, because of the injury, we were able to really have a good look at my kind of biomechanics, I guess, and find problems that were unrelated to the injury. And so because we actually took the time to look at this, we're fixing the injury and we're fixing some other problems that had been kind of ongoing. So in that respect, at the end of the day, when the injury is healed, and then we've solved some other kind of hidden problems that were always there, I'll be at least pedaling a bike straighter.
Yeah, I quite often I've witnessed athletes come back after traumas and after working with their rehabilitation, and it's, as Timmy says, they may injure one part of their body, but as part of their therapy, they've slowed down enough that someone takes some time to fix other things that are going on for them while they're down. And that's exactly the case, I think, with some of the work that Tim and I have done. We found some things that predated the Australia crash that we worked with. And so, yes, could we send him back and he could actually be stronger than he was before? And I think that's absolutely possible. Now it depends on how much you have that is unfinished or that you have lurking in there, and if you don't have anything, well then you'll probably just come back as you were. But if the rehabilitation the silver lining can be that you get some other things fixed, and because you've had to slow down, and someone you're working with has become keen to them, and so we'll see. But I'll bet that Tim comes back stronger.
Ann?
Yeah, well, I went to go watch one of the bike fits with Dr. Pruitt, and I didn't realize that Timmy had some adhesions in his left elbow, so he wasn't getting full extension in his left elbow from a past injury, and so he wasn't able to sit on his bike as well as he could. So Dr. Mellis worked with that with him, and I think that's going to be huge for him. And also, he had some different strength in his right leg and his left leg, and again, because he was able to slow down, and we could look at it and go, hey, let's try and even this out, so maybe you can get equal pedals at stroke on both sides. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does come back stronger, again, because we were able to slow down and check out his whole body and see what was going on with his riding position and just different strengths and weaknesses, and really try and even everything out. So, yeah, he's going to be flying.
John, I was going to ask you along the same lines. I'm wondering, kind of having that 3-month extension to the off season, can that actually make Timmy more competitive in the later summer and fall, whereas he might be going through some burnout or fatigue at that time?
Exactly. It's we have a really, really good year that we can look at from last year, where from start to finish he was pretty solid. He had some allergy issues early, but he kept racing through them, and it was literally really good form from California through the World Championships. And that's a pretty long range. It was a pretty substantial training load through that whole time. And so what happens if you cut out a bunch of this race and training stress, and really the biggest part, one of the biggest chunks we're cutting out is a time frame where he normally has problems with allergies in Europe, and instead of sending him to a race like California where he's already done a bunch of racing, had to come home and recover and then try to rebuild a little bit for the race, it's all been a solid, steady build just for that race. There's the distinct possibility that, yeah, he'll come to that event in better shape and then continue to progress from there on, getting better and better and better. Where last year, we hit a point where we had to dial back and relax and have a little recovery phase in there as well. So from that perspective, yes, and then just like these guys are saying from the biomechanical perspective, I'm going to make a pretty blanket statement that most professional cyclists, especially at the pro tour level, are mildly to completely fanatical about their bike fit, and I just kind of assumed Tim was that way too, because I knew he would go see Dr. Pruitt once or twice a year to have him check his bike fit. And one day he rolled in and was going to set up and ride the trainer in our office, and we're looking at him, and it doesn't look quite right, and he pedaled away, and it turns out his saddle had slipped and was something like 2 or 3 centimeters lower than it should have been, and he was just tolerating it because that was kind of normal. And it was around that same time that we were discovering just how bad the biomechanics were with how he was pedaling from the injury, and starting to work on that. And I think, yeah, I'll agree with everybody else here that the changes that were made in response to the injury in his bike fit and how he pedals will make a pretty substantial difference in the long term. I don't think it's going to be something that shows up right away, but I think, yes, over the course of a year, the little changes and the fraction of a percent here and there will really pay off.
I want to step back real quick, but if each of you just briefly, how did you end up coaching Timmy, John?
I first knew Timmy when he was a Cat 3, I believe, here in Colorado. And I was racing as a 1 and traveling around the country to play bike racer and try and make it big. And we actually went to a race when he was the Cat 3 kid who, along with his buddy Ian, who were destroying everyone in Colorado. And we actually went to a race together, and it was quite... Most guys in the U.S. who have traveled around to races will attest that when you are just skimming to get by, you have a lot of interesting experiences.
Yeah, remember that? Oh man, we could
had-
tell all sorts of good stories.
And it's just one race randomly a long time ago, and then it was really wild to watch his progression from that point on. And I'll never forget the things that those two guys told me in the car at one point on that trip, which was, and where I was, I couldn't believe it. They both said, "We're going to ride the Tour de France someday," and I was just, okay, that's great. And so it has been really wild to watch the progression since then, as it just becomes more and more of a reality. And now that we're looking at Timmy riding a 3-week Grand Tour potentially at the end of the year, it's a big deal. And so what really got us reconnected was I ran into him out on the road prior to the Tour of Colorado in 2011. And he was just coming back from this epic, long 6-hour ride, and he was leaving for Utah to do the race the next day. And I was just thinking to myself, why on earth would you do that? You should not be doing that before 2 of the hardest stage races at altitude in the world. And because altitude races just have a special impact on people. And he was gung-ho on it. And sure enough, he went to Utah and had a pretty good ride at Utah, but Colorado was his main goal, and we talked a little bit. And I talked to him a little bit at Colorado, and just, maybe that wasn't the best way to approach this. And so we started looking at files, and we worked a little bit more at the end of 2011, and we definitely decided that it was a good relationship, and we both decided to continue it. And it's good because it's a very open two-way street. There's days when he wants to do more, and I say no. There's days where he wants to do more, and I say yes, and vice versa.
It's been really good working with John because, he more than anybody has seen my entire progression, my entire career, and he knows what I race like as a Cat 3 when I just started, and what I race like, what I train like, what my capabilities are now, that whole range, that whole 10-year range. And I don't think there's anyone else with Teton's level of experience and expertise that has that view on me. So yeah, at this point, yeah, he makes it's kind of the perfect relationship for me, and I think it's working out very well.
How about you, Ann?
I met Timmy probably when he would come into Fastcat and work with John, and he's always super friendly and says hi to everybody. And I coach a junior team, and he came in and talked to the cross kids, and it went really well. So, and then from that, John, as soon as Timmy was injured, he emailed me and said, "Okay, Ann, I think we need you. Can you work with Timmy?" And I said, "Heck yeah!" And we also we both live in Netherlands, so it made it easy because I would just go to his house and do the PT, and now we're at the Netherlands gym doing PT. So it worked out well that way that we were both in the same area, and I could go over his house. But the connection was more John. He just said, "Okay, we need your help." So and yeah, it worked out perfectly.
Dr. Steve?
Yeah, well, I met Tim last summer in London, or outside of London, Dorking.
That's the first time you guys connected.
Yeah. And we'd both been in the Boulder area here, but not, had never been connected. But when I got to London there, I hadn't even gotten into the hotel yet, and Davis Finney was pimping me out. And he pulled Tim and Taylor aside and said, "Hey, Tim, Taylor, come meet Dr. Steve. And yeah, if you need anything, he'll work on you." And, before I got to my hotel room, I had 2 appointments. And so I was able to work with Tim 2-3 times before the Olympic road race there. And then I never saw him afterwards, or at least, well, not never, but I didn't see him in London or afterwards. But and then he got injured, and he was calling the office trying to find out more about me. And I said, what? And I said, give me, here, I'm going to call him. I said, Tim, it's me, Dr. Steve from London. Oh, you're that guy. Oh, I'm definitely coming in.
Blame the head injury. Blame the head injury.
And so he had forgotten that I'd helped him out, but he went on to tell me how helpful the work I had done with him in London was, because he had crashed in Poland a couple weeks before London, and other than what you'd said, other than the day of the Olympic road race,
I was hurting.
Yeah, it had been a bad stretch for him. So anyway, I was able to earn some trust there and show him some results. And so once he got injured there, some of the riders who had also been injured told him, look, go see Dr. Steve, and we've been working steady since.
Now, Timmy, you just got back from a week in California. How many miles did you get last week?
Man, I did a huge week. I don't even know. Yeah.
800?
I
700?
don't know. I did, on an average, the average day was 5 to 5.5 hours, and that was, 6 out of 8 days were like that. So it was
and you felt
huge.
great.
Yeah, I felt it. It really surprised me actually, both the fitness and the gains I was making in fitness in just a week, and just the fact that the leg felt good after the first day. I felt good after the 5th day. I felt good after the 8th day. There was no kind of gradual onset soreness. So yeah, it's good when you surprise even yourself, I guess.
So the endurance is there, but I guess more toward John and Timmy. How do you get the race speed back?
Well, that's the interesting part. So, I mean, the idea, once we realized, we kind of dreamed up the California trip as just something he was going to need a really big block of volume at some point. And springtime in Colorado, not always the best time to get 6 or 8 days of really consistent weather. And so his wife had spring break, and it was a great opportunity, and what better thing to do than recon most of the first part of the Tour of California. So that's what we dreamed up. Somehow we managed to kind of make it happen, and it worked out. So the volume that we were cramming to get ready from the time he was able to go outside and until he was able to really pedal efficiently, both legs were starting to do the same thing. From that point to when he went to California, it was a cram session of, all right, we got to make sure you're going to survive California. And that's just be able to handle the volume of that week. And obviously we must have done okay, because the implosion that could have happened never happened. And now the next one is okay, we have volume. We know we can handle what the typical race load is in terms of duration, but in terms of intensity, it's going to take a little bit of time to get that. And so the next few weeks will be pretty entertaining, because his days will be rather robust in terms of he's got to do X, Y, and Z workouts all in the same day, just because we're trying to hit a lot of different areas in a short time frame. But he's displayed the ability to do it in the past, so I have no doubt he'll be able to do that this time around. He's got another camp coming up, which should provide some more time where he's really well supported and can actually get a little more in than is normal when he's at home. And finally, he starts out with a race that is going to be hard, and it's definitely if everything goes well, he will be prepared to finish it. And that race should provide the final bits of race intensity needed to go to a race like California, where the field will be a lot deeper, and it'll overall be a harder event than the Tour of Turkey here in a couple of weeks.
And what is exactly the Tour of Turkey? How many days? It's similar to California?
Yeah, it's Tour of Turkey is 8 days at the end of April, and yeah, it's like a pretty lumpy parcours, a lot of climbing, no time trial or anything, so it'll be, a kind of dynamic race decided by a breakaway. And I did it 2 years ago with Liquid Gas, and it's a very nice race. I'm really looking forward to being back there. It'll be certainly ideal preparation for California.
Now, Saxo Tinkoff been in touch with everybody, or do they mainly just contact you and say what's going on? And
yeah.
How do you report to them?
Check in.
How does that work?
I mean, they're the other side of the world over in Europe right now, but yeah, we check in once or twice a week. I just give them the updates. They see how I'm going, and if I need anything. And you know, like I said, I've got a world-class team around me, and you know, so they're not here in Boulder, Colorado, in my home. So you know, they're really not too worried. I don't have to use too many resources on their end because I have kind of so much around me here right at home. So.
But they don't check in exactly like with Steve or Ann or.
No, again,
are they
like
filing
I'm kind of
doctor reports or anything
I'm
like
kind
that?
of the ringleader, and I give
It is,
everybody
okay.
updates and the information.
Actually, Big Brother's watching over our shoulder.
Exactly.
Because all of Timmy's files go onto Training Peaks, and there's
Oh.
various people so Tinkoff that are able to check his
my-
files as well. So after one of the first really long, hard rides he did outdoors, magically, I think it was either the same day or the next day, he got an email from the team saying, "Would you be available to do the tour of Turkey?"
Yeah, no, we're
Oh.
in contrast to like you know having everybody talking with my team every day. They do know my heart rate and my power output every kilometer of the last 2 months. You know, that's just the great thing that we have with training files and power meters, and you know, we can relay that data, and it's really very informative on all the way to my directors and my team on the other side of the world. So yeah, we can all keep tabs on each other pretty well.
What's your plan leading up to Turkey?
In a couple days here, I'm going to head over to Europe and join up with some other of the USA World Championship team selection. And we're going to have a look at the World Championship course, which is in Florence, Italy. We'll just do a quick little recon camp there. And then I will head over to Turkey from there and start racing.
We know you're being on Tour California, obviously defending your title. John was mentioning a 3-week Grand Tour. Would that possibly be the Vuelta?
Yeah, the Vuelta's been on the menu the whole time. So, yeah, the nice thing about this injury is so early, it won't really affect that goal. So that's good.
And I'm also assuming Colorado.
Those two overlap, so it'll be
they do?
one or the
So-
other. Yeah.
Where are you
But-
leaning toward one or the other?
Again, I don't think about it
Okay.
because, like Teton alluded to at the beginning, it always changes all the time. Unless you're Alberto Contador or Cancellara or Boonen, your schedule always changes, and you can't set your whole year on some race that's 6 months from now because it's going to change.
Now, once Timmy's gone, leaves in a few days, Dr. Steve, Ann, is he going to be checking in with you all anymore? Or
No,
is treatment kind of done?
There's no internet in Italy, so I'll be off the grid.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, and I told Timmy to email me if he had any questions, and then probably check in when he's back in town, whenever that is. Because I think it still is good to make sure that he is. I mean, he's in my for physical therapy. He's 90%. He's still not 100. He can't run a marathon yet. We found out, but you know, he still needs to work on proprioception, balance. Some ballistic hopping and jumping. He's still got some weakness there, but I mean, he's got his exercises, and he'll probably get some of that back with the riding. But I still like to keep track of people and make sure they're back to 100%.
So the triathlon in May is out.
I would drown in a triathlon. Yeah, no, for me, even though I feel pretty good and I'm normal and there's no pain and I can do just about everything, this is almost the hardest part because it's easy to get 90% there. It's easy to get 90% back, but the hardest part is getting that last 10%. Getting to the point where I could go on a 6-mile trail run, or I could do one-legged jumps up the stairs. I can't do that today. I can't do my maximum sprint on the bicycle today. It's relatively it's easier to get that kind of endurance pace, or to be able to walk, or do more simple things. But the highest end stuff, that it's going to take another month or two to be truly back to 100%. It's quick and easy to get to 90%, but it takes that much time again to get to 100 and beyond.
Dr. Steve, you going to be checking in?
I will be watching the Velo News for results. There's not, with the work I do, I can't adjust him over the phone, and I can't send him an internet adjustment. Really, once with so many of the athletes I work with, I get to see them for bits and pieces, and I see them in the off season, and then a week here, and then they're gone, and then so it's kind of a patchwork job until they're back and done at the end of the season. Then we typically get a period where we do the cleanup and get them sorted out for the next year, and a little bit at the beginning of the season, but then it's send them off again and hope they don't crash and make your work harder, your job harder when they get back. I'll have to wait till I see them again to see how we're doing.
Timmy, I know we're all cheering for you to have a successful defense of your title.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening at the Retool Studios in Boulder, Colorado, Athlete Lounge, Retool TV with George Thomas, Ann Tromley, physical therapist, John Tarkenton, Fast Cat Coaching, Dr. Stephen Mellis from Proactive Chiropractic, and Saxo Tinkoff's Timmy Duggan. Also want to thank our wonderful supporters, Zeal Optics, Nod and Rose, for providing the wonderful clothing. And also the good folks here at Retool, Scratch Labs, Core Power, Pack Timo, Pack Tour, and everyone who tunes in and supports our show. Thanks very much.